What's up, guys? Everyone is doing well. In this video, I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin, but nonetheless, to go ahead and get it started here, first off on the 4-hour chart, we can see Bitcoin setting the most recent local low here back in the first week of April at around $75,000. Ever since then, it's been in this gradual stair-stepping constructive price action leading into around May 22nd. A few days ago, the new all-time high at, according to this chart, $112,000 precisely. If we look here, we can see this notable trend line of recent, where it was initially here resistance, price broke above, flipped into support, leading into under $12,000. Zooming out even more so, these boxes here horizontally, resistance support zones that I've had in here for months at this point, where we can see the support here during this double top action of the price here, this rough median zone here in yellow being the median of this overall serpentine, this sideways action of the double top for Bitcoin. You can see how these played in quite importantly here from the move from 74,000 leading up to above the purple, managed support, found resistance locally, short term at the yellow, broke the yellow zone here, bottomed out on it around 2 or 3 or so times, depending upon how you want to look at it, then moving up to $112,000. If we look here at the RSI, see here anything above the 382 so far, where the bottom here was set around the 272, but anything above the 382 is corresponding to each of these supports here locally, leading into the $112,000 all-time high throughout this entire gradual price action here towards the upside. If we look down here at the ASO, I had been monitoring this symmetrical triangle here, which fed into the move recently up to $212,000, again finding support along this notable trend here. If Bitcoin were to come back down to it once more, depending upon when, would be somewhere around $104,000 or so, where anywhere from around $102,000 or so, $100,000 in general at this point psychologically, also being a part of this yellow zone here is going to be a very important value, which could potentially be retested. If we look here at the RVI, we can see that each of these points where the median here is broken lines up with these notable moves here up in the price. We can see it here recently with the move up to 112,000. We're seeing the RVI sitting right at the median currently after going the lowest that it has been since 74,000. Yet the price bottomed out at around $107,000 on the dot. So seeing some varying degrees of hidden bullish divergence along with that. Also looking here at the ASO after this symmetrical breakout here, we're also again seeing the bullish sentiment grow here as the bearish sentiment is decreasing, potentially leading into another cross where Bitcoin will then go even higher than 12,000. If you look here at the MACD, it's flipping the 0 point, which could be again like each of these portions here of these main moves so far since $74,000 could all be lining up to continue to go higher here. We see the stock RSI roughly kind of in a similar zone as each of these instances here, which again really is painting the same picture as all these indicators. They're all generally saying the same thing. Finally with this RSI here showing us this horizontal zone, which so far, as I've already pointed out, has corresponded to this local supports of this move here towards the upside thus far. Moving here to the 12-hour chart, the 50 EMA band has acted as support since being broken back in around mid-April, around $84,000-$85,000. The lowermost bound of this sits basically right at $100,000. So again, that could be potential psychological value to retrace to, and it's also roughly the median of the double top sideways range back during December 2024 to around February or so 2025. We're right now seeing some resistance of the RSI here along this important horizontal zone, which I have been pointing out various times over the last number of months. Going back and looking at the entirety of the bull market, you can see how important it is when we see Bitcoin breaking above this, is when this entire move here began. We saw another breaking here, which is when this move here began, right here, of the move from 50,000 to around 108,000, 109,000. We're seeing something very similar where Bitcoin touched the oversold heading into this important threshold. Right now finding resistance right along the sideways areas, which corresponds with each of these moves thus far in the bull market. Again, really generally all that I have been painting over the last number of videos, over the number of weeks leading into months at this point. Also correspondent with this is the 800 EMA here, which is active to support each time on the 12-hour chart as well. Then leading into, again, really can overemphasize these horizontal tops of these local peaks here so far in comparison with everything else, and what conclusion that appears to be pointing to such that Bitcoin is heading into, has already began at this point, and is really about to go into those more volatile and parabolic moves of an impulse towards the upside, which here on this 2-day chart we see, as I've gone over many times, again, we're seeing an uptrend zone here gaining. We see these key resistances here throughout the bull market, see correlates of that on the RSI here as well, with the 618 here being broken each of these notable times recently happening. Again, Bitcoin being at these important horizontal levels as well. Every single time we saw Bitcoin head into, specifically this 2-day chart here, moving into this one, we'll see how each of these areas correspond to the most sizable candles. For example, here, this one would have been around 22%. This one here, 22%. This one around, again, 22%. So approximately 20% or so for each of these notable candles during each of these impulses, or the legs of these impulses thus far, going all the way up into the current moment. 22% really does seem to stand out across each and every single one of these impulses and the individual legs. So given that at this point, the largest candle here for the current move has been around, what, 9% for that one. So somewhere around 8-9%. So a 20% move. As we can see here, these horizontal levels are going to be, you can see when we got started to get those 20% approximately moves was after the horizontal threshold was here. You can see again, same thing here with this horizontal zone here. We started to see these larger candles here, seeing that repeat. So given that Bitcoin is in that same spot as has been in these prior instances of the current bull market right here at the horizontal zone, a 20% candle, let's say that is going to be here soon from where the price currently is, would put it anywhere up to around 130,000. Could push towards 30%, which is something on the weekly, which I'll get to, would push up to around $140,000. So we could be seeing over the next week or so if indeed we're going to see one of those 20 to 30% candles, which are typical of the bull, or the impulses and legs of the bull market, as you can see here so far on the 2-day, could see move up to around $130,000 to $140,000. We move here into this weekly chart showing the M2. The M2, as you can see up here, has had this uptrend of resistance thus far, had met it sometime back around, according to how I have this superimposed here, around June 16th. The M2 is yet again made a new all-time high, just peaking its head above this resistance. Potentially could be seeing an ascending double top here. Maybe now the M2 is topping out. If so, then generally this resistance is holding. But because of this, let's say the M2 continues to even go higher here, moving into, according to this chart, August or September, that if Bitcoin's going to continue to fall along like it has thus far, as I pointed out, each of these local peaks lining up with the M2 so far, then we could see Bitcoin run for a little bit longer if it follows along with the M2. Basically, precisely, usually topping out about a week or so after. Could see Bitcoin run longer, leading into later August, September, which would be extending past where I currently see the most likely, with assuming the M2 were to top out soon and start moving down definitely over the next week, then we would still generally see around late June, July, early August be where Bitcoin's going to top out at, according to this. But like I said, if it extends more into that Q4 territory of closer towards winter this year. And we're seeing the RSI, if we zoom in here, finally break above with the recent weekly closing of the candle, this uppermost bound of this yellow zone, as you can see here. This lines up with each of these breaks of the RSI here, which correspond to these moves here in Bitcoin, which generally, again, is not saying anything else too different than I've already said. Looking at those 2 days, or the 12 hourly just here, now we're on the weekly, which is generally going to give a stronger signal. And that's really basically what I do almost in every single one of these Bitcoin videos, as I go from the 4-hour to the 12-hour to some sort of daily. If it's bi-daily, every 3 days, then to the weeklies, and then to the monthlies, maybe even to the 6-month yearly. Building upon itself is to establish something in the small scale to the larger scale, from the micro to the macro. And if it's all pointing to, or at least appearing to point to the same thing, then that's more likely than not, such as the case being painted now that Bitcoin has already began its current impulse, what I think is the final impulse of the bull market, where we see here each of these major impulses, with each of these 3 here lining up to be a 5-stage impulse wave here towards the all-time high of the current bull run. And looking here at this lower trend line, you can see each of these dips below here for Bitcoin led into these larger moves. Bitcoin is recently finding, or currently straddling upwards, finding resistance with the last weekly candle along this trend line, as I pointed out here, which would be comparable to this instance here, which led into this price action, or here leading into the move up to $809,000. So assuming that the bull market's not over and Bitcoin does have the final run to make, which again, like I said, I think is going to be I personally think it's the last one of the current bull run, and I think it's going to be the most volatile and will have the largest percentage gain of each of these individual legs, where we see here this one back here, depending upon how you take it, around 50%, here this one around 60%, this one 80%, and then 90%, this one here 106%. So generally it's getting larger over time. So I mean 100% at this point would put it somewhere around 160, 150, 60,000. If it pushes towards 174,000, it's going to be around 200,000. Anywhere up to around like 230,000, going to be around 200%, which, as I pointed out over many months at this point with each of these moves here, this one was 100% total impulse of the overall 5 stages. Here 200%. So we could see here 100% move here, 200% move here. Let's say this one's 300%, which would take the price up to anywhere from around, let's see, 210, anywhere from around $210,000. Or if we see here, like I said, 100, 200, and it doubles instead of just increases by 100, this move here would be anywhere from around, let's see, around 240,000 upwards towards 260,000 or so, generally all fitting within the historical Fibonacci's I pointed out here in the past video, with each of these phases, where this is phase 1, phase 2, then phase 1, repeating cyclically. The bear market retracements here structurally taken, we always see this orange zone here specifically kind of tethered, revolving around the 2.272, act as the phase cyclical all-time highs, which, like I said, also kind of finds confluence with what in terms of these consecutive impulses here, and those percentage data move towards the upside. We also see here on the RSI, again, the 272 here acting as a horizontal support. Bitcoin recently got above the 486 here. Each time this has happened, again, lines up with these notable moves. Again, like I said, in a way, still beating a dead horse with each of these all kind of saying the same thing. Specifically from the 2-day to the weekly, here is another weekly chart. And the main thing that I want to point out here is the ASO, where when zooming all the way out and looking at the price action here, which we can see begins June 2011, which is the end of cycle 1, the beginning of cycle 2, so the beginning of phase 1 of cycle 2, which ended here in December 2017 at around $18,000, $19,000, $20,000. And then phase 3 began, and currently this entire price action here is phase 1 of cycle 3, and it's heading into the end, i.e. the all-time high. And if we look down here at the ASO, we can see these notable triangles here where we see the price action kind of like the geometry or shape of a tornado. It's converging inwards or centrally to its point of commonality. Here, as you can see, it converging obviously with these structures of these triangles here, denoting that. And we see this vortex action here of the ASO leading right into this region right here, which is when Bitcoin's bottoming out and then finally starting to reverse towards the upside into this bull run, which ended towards the end of 2017, approximately $20,000. If we look at this one here, we see again the vortex convergent price action, or the RSI action, leading into the move here up to 64,000 for Bitcoin. Here as well again for phase 1 cycle 2, the bottom here all the way up to its top in late 2013. Most recently here again we see leading into the breaking here of the triangle here towards the upside and the downside of the bearish to bullish sentiment. And each of these crossovers you can see here denoted by these horizontal lines are either instances within the triangles you can see here, 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 or afterwards, such as this one here. But each of these crosses going all the way back to 2012 of May, you can clearly see here every time they are signaled, it's always very bullish, and it's been that way, as you can see here, throughout the entirety of the current bull run. And just going back to the week of the 12th to the 19th, so just not too long ago, obviously, we saw the same thing flash here during the stage of when we see Bitcoin breaking out of its triangle structure, which aligns with here the stage of the bull market of this price action. On top of that, we see here with the resistances of the uppermost here, really, as I've already pointed these out on the lower time frame charts, also being broken. We look here at this 2-weekly chart, we're continuing to see the open interest money flow here, breaking this resistance, which, I mean, as I've already shown in past videos, going all the way back even further than what's shown here, as always, these notable trend lines, these resistances, once they're broken, correlates with Bitcoin having moves towards the upside in terms of sizable gains. And we see here the uptrend of the current bull run leading into around the 618 to 382, again, encompassing that range around $230,000, $250,000 or so. Most clearly pointed out to and denoted here with this chart, as I briefly went over earlier, of these phase cyclical, the structural Fibonacci zone tethered around the 2.272. I believe once we see this ascending resistance here on this monthly chart broken by seeing a monthly candle close above it, could potentially be this month if the last few days left of this month, not too much longer at this point, happen to be quite bullish, especially going into the new week. Over the first few days of it, could potentially see move upwards towards, like I said earlier, for various reasons I pointed out, 130 to 140,000, which would break this resistance here towards the upside and close above it. But I would definitely say by June, likely going to be moving above this, assuming obviously just to keep an open mind and entertaining contrary points here that go against my own bias. The Bitcoin will actually move here eventually towards this orange zone somewhere with a basis around the 2.272 at around $208,000 approximately. And then lastly here, looking at the 6-month chart, which, as I've pointed out a few times over the last 2 or 3 months or so, maybe a bit longer, we got a month and 5 days left. If this closes green, this will avert the trend, the pattern that I pointed out, where we can see red candle here, bear market. We see the green candles close above, bull market. We see the first red candle here, bear market begins. We then start to see new green candles closing above the prior all-time high here. Then we see red. Just as once we see these prior all-time highs broken, and we see a new 6-month candle close above here, such as we've seen, the first red candle initiates the bear markets, as I've said with each of these main 4 areas right here. So as long as this doesn't close red, we'll revert that pattern going all the way back to 2011, such that the bear market is not beginning and there still is some, at least a last kind of final thrust towards the upside of the bull market, or maybe Bitcoin is going to go far higher than I am leaning towards in my model and view of the market. Like I said, anywhere from around 160, 180, upwards towards 200, 230, 250,000. I would say maybe around $300,000 at highest. I just don't personally, not one of those people, as I've said a few times, that believes seeing Bitcoin go towards the $400,000, $500,000 or higher value is going to be something that's all too likely. It's definitely a possibility, but I just don't personally think it's all too likely this time around, as I expect that more close or towards around the end of this decade, around 2030, 2032, 33 or so, to give a range. But that was all that I wanted to go over in this video. So as always, I hope you all enjoyed. None of this is meant to be financial advice, but all of that being said and everything gone over, I hope you all have a wonderful day.